So as a JavaScript developer, you often find yourself working with JSON as a data format. And this JSON often comes from a server that could be either something that you built or it could be in someone else's server, just an API call that you made. And there's no way for us to really know that what we get back is a valid JSON, something that we just can parse. So a good practice is to validate this JSON before we start parsing it. And to do that, we want to have a neat function for it. And I have this repo that I've been working on called awesome JavaScript snippets. I will link it in the comments. But that one has one function called isValidJSON. And I haven't tried this function yet. And of course, since it's part of my collection of snippets, I want to make sure it's a good function. So what I want to do is to test the function properly using Jest, and also make some nice documentation about the function. And for that I'm going to use the standard of JSDoc. So over to the computer. Okay, let's start out by writing the tests for this function. So the function is called isValidJSON, takes in a string. Inside a try block, it tries to parse it, and if no error was thrown, it will return true. If an error was thrown, it will go into the catch block, and we will console log the error.message, and then we return false. So we want to test this function to see that it works correctly. So I have just made an import here. I made a describe block for isValidJSON, and I am using Jest as I mentioned. So we have our test. We have our test function correctly imported. We expect isValidJSON, I should say the correct caps here, isValidJSON to be instance of function. We save. Let's see here. isValidJSON function correctly imported. Nice. Test returns false for invalid JSON string. Expect isValidJSON, pass it in a string. We can just pass in anything really. Let's do ABC. And we should expect false, so to be falsy. Save. Okay, so something happened. To be falsy. Yeah, function correctly imported returns false for invalid JSON string. Nice. Let's copy this test, because we're doing a similar one. Returns true for valid JSON string. So let's make this into valid JSON. That should be valid JSON, and I need to flip this truthy. Oh, it's not valid JSON because I missed curly brace here in the end. So this should fail now. Return true for valid JSON string, but it was not a valid string, so that seems correct. Now it should be valid JSON, and it should return true. I need to scroll down, I think. Yeah, returns true for valid JSON string. And the last test I want to make is to make sure that it would return false if I forget to pass in a string at all. because we don't want it to return null or undefined or anything like that. We want it to always return a boolean. Return false when no string was passed in. So we just call the function without a string, and then we expect falsy. Yeah, returns false when no string was passed in. And when you don't pass in anything, this variable here, this parameter, will be undefined. So it will do JSON parse of undefined. We can see the output from that here. Unexpected token U in JSON at position 1. So we tried to parse undefined, which threw an error and returned false. So the last thing we were going to do was to add some nice documentation to this function, a nice comment before it in the JSDoc style. And for that I have a VS Code extension for that called lidit. So it's the first one on my list here. I will use that, and it will stub out some what it thinks that these fields should be. So the first row is correct. Function isValidJSON. We have a param of type string, and what should we call it? JSON string. And return type is boolean. Is JSON string valid JSON? So if we hover this now, oops. Okay, so now I have added types and descriptions to them. So if I hover this now, it will give us some more information on how to use the function, which is nice. So let's stop there. Now we can feel a bit more safe about using this awesome snippet in a project. So I hope that you learned maybe something about testing or something about JSON in this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.